Today on Riffs and Gear, we go over the 4-cable method. I recently posted a video to my Instagram account showing some tones with my Mesa Boogie Dual Rectifier, and I was controlling it and getting some of the effects tones out of the Line 6 Helix, and I got a lot of comments asking to kind of go over that setup. So we're going to split it into two parts. This video, part one, will be going over how to set up and what the purpose is of a 4-cable method, and part two is going to be using the Helix to control your amplifier's channel switching. All right, so let's get started with part one. The 4-cable method can actually be done with any processor, and this is nothing new. We are not reinventing the wheel, but this is important for when we get into part two. Now, the purpose of the 4-cable method is to be able to use a processor in such a way where you can use effects in front of the amplifier, i.e., using an overdrive and a phaser and effects like that. And you can also put effects in the amplifier's effects loop, like time-based effects, delays, modulations, things like that. And this allows ultimate flexibility all in a single unit and only using 4 cables, hence the name 4-cable method. Brilliant, right? For this particular video and for this particular scenario, I will be referring to the Line 6 Helix rack, but I will stress that this is also applicable to any other processor. So let's get our hookups straight. Now, the hookups, no matter what you are using, are the same. This is universal. This does not change. And I will actually put a diagram down below in the description on how to hook up your processor using the 4-cable method. All that is required is your processor has an effects loop and your amplifier has an effects loop as well. These are crucial and you have to have these. So for this example, I am plugging my guitar directly into the front input of the Line 6 Helix. I am plugging the unbalanced output of the Helix into the effects return of my Mesa Dual Rectifier. I am then going from the Dual Rectifier's effects send and going into the Helix's effects return. And finally, for the fourth and final hookup, we are going from the effects send of the Helix loop into the input of the Dual Rectifier. Now let's move to the Helix controlling software. And it is crucial, in order to get this set up properly, you need to insert a send and return effects loop block. And you also need to make sure you have selected the proper effects loop that you are physically plugged into on the Helix. In this case, I'm using effects loop number 1. So I have effects loop number 1 engaged. Now you're going to have to play with the send and return levels because every amplifier is different and every loop is different. But in my particular case, I am sending unity gain and my return is back down to minus 8.5 dB. Remember, this return directly affects the input hitting the front of the amplifier. So we want this to be the same as if we were going to take our guitar and plug directly in to the amplifier. So I actually spent some time A/Bing these and came up with minus 8.5 dB as the correct setting for the return on the Helix. Now, if you were using a Helix in particular, it is pretty crucial that you go into global settings and switch the master volume on the front of the unit to affect the XLR only. You don't want this affecting all the outputs. Otherwise, if your volume gets bumped, you are affecting the balance of the loop relation and the amp. So disengage that and it will automatically send unity gain out of the loop. After all of this, it is now time to dial in some tones. So for example, what I can now do is I can go to my clean setting. This is just a basic regular clean setting. And I can now go to my channel 3 and add an overdrive, in this case, an 808 overdrive into the front end of the amp with one foot switch click. And I can go from this tone to a clean tone with a delay in the loop with one click. And I can now go to channel 2 with no overdrive engaged. Actually, I was wrong. The overdrive is actually engaged on this particular patch, but you get the idea. Now, since my processor is rack mounted out front, I would get rid of my pedal board and have just the Helix controller out on the front of the stage with me. Now, if you guys were using a floor-based controller, all these settings are still the same. All the connections are still the same. You simply just have 4 cables going from your amplifier area to the front of the stage. And you could build a loom easily, so it's still one harness and your hookups are color coded or something like that. It's still really cut and dry after you do the initial patchwork. Now, if you've noticed, I've actually been changing amp channels as well as the effects, and we will get to that in the next video, part 2, channel switching your amp with MIDI and your Helix or your processor, whatever you're using. But that's next video. All applicable links down below in the description. You've been wonderful. I have been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.